You never know. You never know. Okay, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Sorry I missed you for so much of this week. A lot of work, a lot of travel. Just been a long week, so really glad to be back in the saddle. So today, Mir Hashem, will learn a blot and a half. As you can see, Lamed Mem is pretty short. And then on Shabbos, we'll pick up with the next blot and a half. Top line of Lamed Testament, Amar Rabba, should be Rava. Shmamino, Kesher Elyon Deoraisa. That first Kesher is considered a Din Deoraisa. This is a little bit nuanced. The Isal Kadaitach Derabanan. If you want to say that the knot at the top, really at the base, is Derabanan, then my Istrich Lemistre Sudden Betitis. Then what do you mean? That's how you attach it. If you're saying that it's attached only me Derabanan, why did I need a pasuk to be matir? The Kesher is only a Din Derabanan. That would have been obvious. After all, we do know hatokif tkifa achas eno chibur, that when there's only a tenuous connection, eno chibur, it's not connected, and as well that if it were to be the case that it's only derabanan, then it's not even connected halachically midaraisa in the first place. Shmami no deraisa must be that elyon. The kesher elyon is deraisa. Otherwise, we wouldn't have needed a matir because it wouldn't have been considered connected to be shatnez in the first place. Amar Rabba bar of Ada. Rav Ada, follow the names here. This is a little confusing. Rabba says in the name of Rav Ada, Amar Rav Ada, Amar Rav, and there's a little bit of an extra. There's like a duplicative language here, but it's not corrected by the Meforshim. And Amar Rav Ada, Amar Rav, Im nifsak hachut me'ikaro. If one of the strings that are closest to the corner of the beged, the loop that goes around the beged, if one of those strings tear, psula. So this is Ladina. We actually paskin this way, that if in your tzitzis, the loop that goes in the hole of the beged and comes back around to itself, if one of those strings tear, the tzitzis are puzzle. And if you wear those tzitzis, you are mevatel the mitzvah saseh of tzitzis, because the Torah says you're obligated to wear a four-cornered, that when you wear a four-cornered garment, you're obligated to have the appropriate strings on them. But if nifsak, the chut me'ikaro, the halacha is that they're psula. Yosef Rav Nachman of Kamer Lashmaisa. He said he was teaching this din, this memra of Rav, and he says Eisvei Rav the Rav Nachman. He says to Rav Nachman, I disagree. Ba'med var mamurim. We have a brisa. It's actually what we refer to as a Medrash Chazal. It's one of the four profiles of the Torah Satanoim. But what does this Medrash Chazal say? The Medrash Chazal says, "B'medvar mamurim," that we say that if nifsak chut ikaro, that it's possible. That's only betchilaso. That's if when you're building it, when you're making the tzitzis in the first place, it tears aval besofo. But if it tears after it's built, then they should still be kosher. Shiara vigarduma of kolshu. As long as there's even a tiny bit left, you should be fine. Even if it's torn, as long as there's a little bit of the stub of the string, you're good to go. My shiarav umay gardumav. My lav that shiarav is the ifsek minayu v'ishtar minayu. That perhaps shiarav means that if it tore, but don't worry, there's still something left. And gardumav the igardum igridume. And if gardumav, then what does that mean? That even if it's totally broken off, it should be kosher. So therefore, against the din of Rav, that maybe we should not say that the string that tears at the base is pasul. Lo, says the Gemara, you misunderstood the language. Chadaktani. It's not the language of shiyarav vigardumav. It's shiure gardumav kolshu. As long as there's any amount left, that Bryce is talking about another case, then kolshu. Velema gardumav. Why do we have the word shiuro? Says the Gemara. No, we're talking about not the ikar. We're talking about later down, like further down the string. And why doesn't it just say gardumav shiyarav lamali? Says the Gemara. Hakamash malan debainan shiura legardumav kedela anvan. That let's say outside of the last knot of the tzitzis, not by the ikar. This Bryce is not talking about that. But later, toward the end of our strings, right when the strings go from all the chulios to the flowing open strings, so then how long does the stub have to be there if it tears? Kedei le'anvan. So that is what the Gemara is talking about. So I'll just show you on my tzitzis to get the case clear. Right, so you have here the beged itself. So what Rav was teaching is that if one of these strings here tear, one of these, you're done. Your tzitzis are pasul. Let me paskin like that, Ladina. The taicha, the brisa, was over here, that if one of these tear, as long as there's enough left kedei le'anvan, that you can tie it, then it's still going to be kosher. Shorter than that, you really should swap out your tzitzis. So says the Gemara. And that is all that din. Good. We're a third of the way down on Lamed Tesmet Aleph. Says the Gemara, Yosef Rabba, Veka'amar Mishmei Rab, Chut Shel Kerech Ola Min Minyan. So says the Gemara, we have 8 strings. And when you look at the strings, the way that it's built is that you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These are the 8 that come around. One of these 8 do the krichios, do the wrapping around. So that means there's 7 inside here at any one time, and we use one of the 8. It's ola mina minyan. We need 8 strings. What was the havamin? You're going to use a second chut. You're going to. So that's what the Gemara says. We're going to discuss this, but it is ola mina minyan. Amar le Rav Yosef. I agree to the din that you're saying, Rabbah, but you need to know you need to know who it's from. It's not Rab. Shmuel Amra velo Rav. You have the wrong person's name. And says the Gemara, Itmar Nami Amar Rabba Bar Barchana, Sachli Reb Yoshia Demin Usha, and 2 words are missing. Mishmei de Shmuel. Literally, the words that are most important are the words that are missing, because we were trying from Rav Yosef to learn that this wasn't a din of Rabba, rather a din of Shmuel. Choshel Kerech Ola Min Minyan. Same idea, just quoting it in the name of Shmuel instead of in the name of Rab. Yosef Rabba, correction. The Ka'amar Mishmei de Shmuel. Tcheles shekorach ruba kshera. If you have a tcheles, and let's not be confused, we're going to talk about tcheles a little bit later today. But Rashi over here defines a tcheles. Look at Rashi 2/3 of the way down. When we use the word tcheles over here, what are we talking about? Zeu shem kol hatzitzis. That's the name of one whole set of strings. It doesn't refer to the color of tcheles, to the blue, nothing. It's the whole thing. This whole thing in the Gemara is called a tcheles. So now that we know that, what did he say? Tcheles shekarach ruba kshera. Let's say that I don't stop. Right here I have 4 krichios, 7, 8, 11, 13. That's how our tzitzis are made. We're going to discuss that a little bit too today. Let's say I kept going and made more krichios, and it was rove. All the way up to here was all tightly wound. Let's say that that's how I made it. If you're karach ruba, what's the halacha? So state in the Gemara says that if karach ruba, the halacha is kshera. And the Gemara says, over here also you got the wrong name. Rabbah said it in the name of Shmuel. The Gemara corrects it. Amar le Rav Yosef, Rav Amra, below Shmuel. You got this one flipped also. Itmar Nami, Amar Rav Huna bar Yehuda. Amar Rav Sheshes, Amar Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, Amar Rav. That if I decide not to stop at my 4 sets of krichios, but I push the envelope and I go all the way up to here, beyond 50%. The halacha is that it's still kosher ladina. Reb Chia Breder Rav Nasan Masni Hachi. He learned this halacha that we just said differently. Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav Sheshes, Amar Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, Amar Rav Tchela shekarach ruba kshera. Filu lo karach ba'el chulya achas kshera. And on the flip side, even if you only did one wrapping, so then the halacha is that it would still be kosher. And v'noi tcheles, what's considered to be a beautiful way to treat a full corner. So the halacha is not like we said that rove. Yes, it's kosher, but what's the ideal? The halacha is shlish gedil ushnei shlishe anaf. So if you look at the full length of the strings here, this is almost exactly correct. Ideally, what are considered beautiful tzitzis? When about 1/3 have the wrappings, and the remaining 2/3 is free to go, free to flow. All right, that's considered noi tzitzis. That's what the Gemara says. Noi tzitzis is 1/3 krichios, 1/3 of the wrappings. We're going to see where we get our wrappings of 7, 8, 11, 13. And I'm sure over the years you've seen tzitzis where they're done in 1, 2, 3 chulios and then skip a little. 1, 2, 3, skip a little. 1, 2, 3. The Ravid and the Rambam, big machlokos, is certainly when you're dealing with tcheles. But we'll see a fascinating tosfos on the bottom here that Maraf Sinigro, that without tcheles, so many halachos change. So, anyways, that's what the Gemara says, that noi tcheles, we're 2/3 of the way down, a little more, is shlish gedil. The first third should be wrapped up in chulios. Ushnei shlishe anaf. V'kamashir chulia. How much is considered to be the appropriate amount for a wrapping? Tanya Rebbe Omer Kadesh Yichroch V'Yishna V'Yishalesh. You have to have enough to go around 3 wraps. 3 is the basic minimum. So from here we have that sheet of the tcheles that come in 3s, right? The one where we see it looks like kind of equally spaced out. That is from this line of Gemara. I think the Rambam holds this way, but I can't remember all the shitas of the tcheles. I don't personally wear tcheles. My Rebbeim kind of said no. Rav Elyashiv, Zichron Tzaddik L'Bracha, has a tshuva about this, that he holds that, and this also comes from today's Gemara, that Tcheles requires a Masorah. And because we don't necessarily have a Masorah, even though we may be able to identify the Chilazon, possible, even if all of that is true, that even if all of that is true, but because we don't have a Masorah, so the halacha is that we're not really supposed to wear Tcheles. Who cares if it's blue? It's blue. Yeah, but there's a din that it should be min knaf, which you guys have learned about already. It should be the same color if you can. The only exception should be for the sake of tcheles. You're not sure, don't wear it. So he held that because we had a big suffix in Misora, afal pi that we know what the chilazon is, we know what kind of mollusk it is, we know exactly how to do it. Doesn't matter. There's no Misora. That's why Rav Shechter also held this way about turkey. There's no Misora. He doesn't eat any turkey. Say they're like birds that don't have masoras. Really, with birds in particular, we usually know from the negative. The Torah says don't eat these. We typically assume you can eat all the others, but we have an added layer of masora only if the bird is considered to be a regular bird, whatever that means. Certainly not predatory. Okay, we're off the page here. Let's go. So the Gemara says, Tana, Taf Aleph, Nun Aleph. We see this syntax every once in a while. Hapoches on the lower end of your krichios lo yivchos misheva. You should never do less than 7. That's obviously our lowest. We do 7, 8, 11, 13. Ve'amosif lo yosef al shloshes. And if you're going to do more, you shouldn't add more than 13. Now, it doesn't tell us to do 7, 8, 11, 13. This Gemara is very, very cryptic. And now it's going to get esoteric while we're at it. Hapoches, why did we say lo yivchos misheva? Because obviously, keneged shiva rikim. Obviously, there are 7 levels of the upper worlds. And the tzitzis is going to reflect that. This now connects to that Gemara that says, remember the Gemara that are quoted by Rashi, that Tchelis is Dome Leyam, it's all part of the Sheva Rikios Gemara. It's not quoted over here, but the ideas are all connected. And why the Hamosif Lo Yosef Al Shloshes? Right now, obviously, there are a bunch of Kabbalists in the room. We don't want to exceed the following. Keneged Shiva Rikin V'Shisha Avirin Shebenehem. Look, Chevra, there are 7 worlds. And in between those 7 worlds are 6 brackets. Okay.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. We're all on the same page. So therefore, we're not supposed to exceed the 13 because I don't even know what I'm saying. That's what the Gemara means. Is that there are 7 rikiyas and 6 separators between the rikiyas, and therefore we don't want to exceed 13. Now that means that for us Ashkenazim, really Sephardim too, they just add a loop to each one. Is that we do 7, 8, 11, 13. But according to the Lashon of the Gemara, we should be makbid that the 7 should not be 6.5, because you shouldn't lo yivchos misheva, and don't be more than 13. So you might want to do 12.5, because it's half loops, right? When you're doing loops, it depends where you tie the knot. So you just gotta try and be careful. Until I read this Gemara, I was always makbid to do 1 extra just in case. I never wanted to fall short because it's hard to count the loops. I always count when I make tzitzis. I call it pull it tight. I do 0, 1, 2. No, you should do that for the 7. But when it comes to the 13, you should not start from 0 because you call hamosi if it has to be less. That's the language of the Gemara, less than 13. Tanak shehu maschil belavan. Even if you are dealing with tcheles, the first krichios should be white. They should be white. Haknaf min knaf. It should be the same color as the garment. And uchshehu misayim, and the last krichios misayim belavan as well. Why? Malin bekodesh velo moridin. What a fascinating line. Afal pida tcheles l'chora is a din deoraisa. Malin bekodesh velo moridin. That's what the Gemara says. Is that we treat the mitzvah of white tzitzis more than we do the din of tcheles. Rashi Malin bekodesh velo moridin v'chevan deaktame kra lemin knaf. Because the Torah says knaf min knaf, that's the drashas hakanaf, and we say it should be the same. Therefore, shma mina chashufu hilkach imesayim betcheles havalei morid sofa tzitzis mitchilasa. Because the kdimus, it's not because one's holier, it's because of the kadimus, because the Torah was makdim hakanaf psil tcheles. Which more word can hakanaf? So therefore that has more chashivus. That's what the Gemara says. Back inside, Rav the Rabba bar of Chana. Have a yasve. They were sitting and learning. Have a kochalif ve'azelahu gavra. There was a man who walked by. The michse glima de kula tchelta. He was a wealthy guy. He was wearing a garment that was completely stained tcheles. It's a little bit much. Keilu lahavdil. It's like wearing a brand name when it like screams the brand name at you. It's a little much, bro. We know it's expensive. Got it. You're wealthy. We get it. Good job. So this guy, his whole garment was tcheles. The ramile tchelta. And he also had tcheles that was that way. That's what Rashi says. Ramile tchelta. The last Rashi says tzitzis. The strings were also all blue. Machlokas Amoraim about this. So, oh yeah, Veramila Tchelta, Ugdila Migdil, Rashi Ugdila Migdil, Kol Atzitzis Haisagdil, Velo Shiur Ba'anav Klal, and it was wrapped all the way to the end. There were no flowing strings, so we're mixing two cases now. The previous case we said that it's not right; it's still kosher if it's rove. This guy was all blue, and the krichios were all the way to the end. So just imagine the whole thing is all tied up. That's what the case of the Gemara. Amarab yoe glima v'lo yoe tchelta. Beautiful garment. Your tzitzis are not geshmak. You got a problem. You didn't do it the right way. And then the Gemara says, Rabbi Bar Chana Amar yoe glima v'yoe tchelta. No, your garment's beautiful and your tzitzis are also beautiful. So says the Gemara, what's going on over here? What's the machlokes about? Lamed Tesam at base, 3 lines down. B'mai kamiflage. Rabbi Bar Chana savar ksiv gdil ksiv psil. We have 2 psukim. O gdil, o psil. It could either be all wrapped up in krichios, in the gdil, or it could be all flowing strings minus a minimum at the bottom of, just doing one quick chulia. The Rav Savar, le'olam psil ba'inan. Really, we do need to have flowing strings. Ve'ahu gdilim leminyanahu da'asa. And the word gdilim just teaches us how many strings we need to have. Gdil shnayim, gdilim arba. The word gdil is literally, it's a singular word, but if you take one string and put it through the hole, now you have 2. So gdilim is 2 full strings that are now 4. That's how the Gemara does the math. Asa gdil uposlehu mitocho. Let's say asagdil, that when you're doing the wrapping, uposlei mitocho, the wrapping string is one of the 8. This is something we saw earlier. So this is what their machlokes is about this thing, the case that's all tcheles, is they were just discussing whether or not it was a requirement to have any free moving strings, or could they all be bound up. The halacha is not quoted in the Gemara, but we kind of know how we wear tzitzis, but we also don't live on the edge. We do exactly what the baseline is. We do it the right way. We don't get into these complicated cases. Sometimes I see this in shul because I can't focus. I see all like the mistakes in tzitzis. You see like it really starts with that outer knot. One Shabbos the person has a double outer knot and it's loose. The next week he has one outer knot. 4 weeks later the guy's all the way down to the nubs and it just keeps coming undone. And you can see that there's one long string that has the coils imprint. So they gotta. So that's why there's a famous play on words, a notricon. The word tzitzis is Rosh Tevos for Tzadik, Yafrid, Tzitziosav, Tamid. Mr. Brewer quotes this, I think in Siman Ches, somewhere in the early parts of Shulchan Aruch, that Tzadik, Yafrid, Tzitziosav, Tamid. You should always make sure your strings are nice and neat. You should tighten them every once. Talus strings, you should probably tighten kimat every day, certainly once a week. The tzitzis, these as well, every once in a while, just close them because otherwise they'll come undone. Some of the new companies, they'll put a dot of crazy glue. They'll do one knot, the Shem Mitzvah Tzitzis, put a dot of crazy glue, and then close the second knot. And minus any major activity, it stays for a very, very long time and prevents the issues that we're discussing over here about them coming undone. 8 lines down, Lamites in the base. Amar Shmuel Mishmei Levi, Chut Semer Potrin Bishel Pishtan. If you have a wool string, it exempts us from the isser of shatnez if there is a linen beged. This we know. We know that there's no isser of shatnez when it comes to the wool and linen of tzitzis. But ibayalahu, we're not sure if it's in both directions. The case that we just gave was where the strings are wool and the beged is linen. What if it was reversed? What if the strings were linen and the other way? Yeah. What if the strings were linen and the beged is wool? Now, ours are wool and wool. It's just that it's allowed to be shatnez, but these are shilas in regards to tchelas. What happens if there's no tchelas? Does this didn't change? Okay, fine. So ibayalahu, what's the question? Shel pishtan, let's say the strings were linen. Mao shifter b'shel tzemer, if the beged was wool. And semer, do we argue tzemer b'shel pishtim hu depatar? No, we only allow wool strings with a linen garment. Kevin de tcheles patra lavan nami patra, that since tcheles would become pater, then lavan would as well. We don't care about the colors, the mix of strings. Aval pishtim bitsemer lo, but had it been that the strings were linen and the beged was wool, no. Odilma kevin dechsiv lo silva shat temer pishtim yachdav, and it also says gim tasalach loshna tzemer bepishtim loshna pishtim bitsemer. We don't. Which one is it? Are we makbid on the flipping? Do we say that it's only wool strings with linen garment that's pater, or do we say that it's the reverse as well? So Tashma, third of the way down. Amar Rechava Amar of Yehuda. We just had his name just probably less than 10 blot ago, Rechava, I think. Chute Tzemer Potrin Bishel Pishtan. Bishel Pishtan Potrin Bishel Tzemer. That's pretty clear. Asked and answered. We wanted to know, is it in both directions? Is it only wool strings with linen garment, or can it even be linen strings and wool garment? The Gemara says in the name of Rechava, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, that it's both directions. And chute tzemer upishtim potrin b'chol makom. The mixture of strings, if some of the strings are wool and some are linen, that's also fine. Ve'afilu b'shirayim. This is true even in regards to the beged being made out of silk. So now we have three different materials. The beged's made out of silk. The strings are made out of two materials, wool and linen. So he says it's allowed. Upliga de Rav Nachman. Not everyone agrees that you can have silk as the beged. After all, Rav Nachman disagrees. It says the Gemara, the Amar Rav Nachman hashirayin potrin minat tzitzis. Silk is pater from tzitzis. So in other words, if I have a four-cornered garment and it's made out of silk, so the halacha is that it would be pater. That means you're not obligated to put strings on it. And Esvei Rava Rav Nachman, I completely disagree with you. Where do you even get that from, Rav Nachman? Hashiroim, v'haklach, v'hasrikin. These are three types of wool in descending order. All of them are kosher. All of them are silk, I should say. Kulan chayavin b'tzitzis. How could Rav Nachman say that tzitzis that are made, the beged that's made out of silk are not chayiv in tzitzis? Hare. The Brisa doesn't say it that way. The Brisa seems to be very clear. Shiraim v'aklach v'asrikin kulan chayav mitzitzis. So what would Rav Nachman answer? He'd say midrabanan. If you want to say that it is in fact midrabanan, then the seifa is a bit of a problem. V'chulan semer pishtim potrin bahen. That if the strings are made out of both wool and linen, and the beged is semer, so then there's no isur shatnez, it's potrin. But if semer is only chayv midrabanan, how can it pater wool and linen? It has to be deraisa. Okay? You can't have the beged be derabanan and say that there's no din of shatnez. The beged's part of the tzitzis. It has to be that it's deraisa. So it says the Gemara, Yamris bishlama deraisa, then I can understand hainu demishtaru b'hu kilayim. If you want to say that the silk garment is chayiv in tzitzis midaraisa, yeah, if it's chayiv midaraisa, then we have the Torah's heter of shatnez. No problem. We can have wool and linen strings. But if you say Yamris Bishlama if you say Eli Yamris Derabanan, if you want to say that wearing a silk garment is only a din derabanan, Hechi Mishtru B'Ukilayim. What kind of heter is that? The only chiyuv for tzitzis there is midrabanan. But what makes the isser of shatnez go away is the din dorais of tzitzis. So you can't say on a garment that only has a chiyuv derabanan of tzitzis that it allows to override shatnez. That doesn't work. So you can't say, Rav Nachman, that there's a din derabanan of shirayim. It has to be that it's chayv midoraisa. Says the Gemara, you're right. Ema, when it comes to a garment that's made out of silk, what should we say? Ot semer, ot pishtim. The strings are either made out of wool or they're made out of linen. But that therefore brings us back to the possibility that silk is only chayv midrabanan, because he changes the brisa. It's no longer both strings that are made out of wool and linen. It's either wool or linen, and that's not shatnez. And therefore, we could still be in a case scenario where the garment itself is silk. I don't know if I'm right, but sometimes when I go to these places that I go, these synagogues, temples, whatever they are, the very, very shiny strings, they don't look like wool. Have you seen these? They're super shiny. Yeah. Well, I wonder what material. It doesn't look like wool. It doesn't feel like wool, but I don't know if it's silk. But either way, that wasn't the shaila of the Gemara. The shaila of the Gemara is if the beged is silk, do we have the din of dalit kanfos, arba kanfos on silk? That seems to be a discussion in the Gemara over here. Rav Nachman was able to conclude that it was derabanan. Where are we? Here you go. Hachanami mistabra that silk is not going to be chayv midoraisa, and that with silk you're not allowed to have wool and linen strings, because we're 2/3 of the way down to Ketani Seifa. Hain, that when we talk about these three types of wool, which is kilai, not kilai, where's the beginning of that Gemara? Okay, the three types of wool. I can't find it right now what they're called. But when you have these three types of silk, hein b'minan potrin, you're allowed to have strings of their own min, but shelo b'minan ein potrin. But you're not allowed to have a mixture with the silk. And says the Gemara, "Iyamris bishlama derabanan hainu demifteru b'minan." We could understand why you're only allowed to have non-shatnez on the silk. That we understand. Ali Amr's Deoraisa, Tzemer Pishtim with the Pata. Had it been that it was a Din Deoraisa, the Brisa shouldn't have said that it can only have its own material. It should have allowed even wool and linen. Elamai, it must be that it's Derabanan. Says the Gemara, Imi Shumav, that's true. That's not a good argument. Lo Iria. Kidirava. What does Rava say? The Rava Rami. Rava has a couple of psukim that conflict with one another. We've seen this many times in Shas. Ksiv hakanaf min knaf. It says that the corner of the garment, saying that we need the strings to be of a similar material. Uchsiv, it also says tzemeru pishtim. It also says that there can be wool and linen. So how does that work? If you're saying the strings are the same as the baguette, and then you're saying wool and linen are allowed, that's a stira. So what does the Brisa say? Tzemeru pishtim. When it comes to wool and linen, potrin b'minan, bein shelo b'minan. Potrin, bein b'minan, bein shelo b'minan. If the garment is made out of wool or linen, then we don't care what the strings are made out of. They can be wool or linen. They can be opposites. It could be shatnez. It's 100% mutter. We don't have a problem with shatnez when there's a chiyuv deraisa for tzitzis. But sha'ar minin, outside of wool and linen, only b'minan potron, shelo b'minan, ein potron. And what that shows us is that if it's silk, is that perhaps it is going to still possibly be chayv minator, if you want to say that. But Rav Nachman, he argues Kedatana de Rabbi Shmuel, the Tana de Rabbi Shmuel, Hov begad the Torah stam. Usually, when it like al kanfei big dame, it doesn't tell us what kind of baguette it is. It says it's stam. We have no idea what kind of material it is. And in one place by Shatnez, we know that the baguette we're talking about is wool and linen. So then afkol tzemeru pishtim. So he says, therefore, all cases of tzemeru pishtim should be where we have a heter of Shatnez, but not by silk. So there's just a big machlokas about silk in this Gemara. We would have to really unpack this to make the machlokas super, super clear. We'd have to get into the Rishonim to see how it plays out in the poskim. And I don't know how we pass in the Maisa. I don't think I've ever seen silk tzitzis. I'm sure they're out there, but I've never seen a pair. They're probably very comfortable. Okay, next, let's just learn this last little piece of Gemara, which will bring us to the two dots at the bottom, and then we'll start on a continuing sugya. Amar Abaye, that we just learned this din of Tana de Rabbi Shmuel that seemed to imply that Tzemeru Pishtim is where we have the leniency of shatnez, but not by silk. But says the Gemara, V'hai Tana de Rabbi Shmuel, this line that we just learned from Tana de Rabbi Shmuel, Mafka, Me'idach Tana de Rabbi Shmuel, it undoes another shita from Tana de Rabbi Shmuel. What's that? The Tana de Rabbi Shmuel. The pasuk says, Beged, this is by the world of Tsaras. So the Gemara quotes the pasuk on the side here. Beged ki yebo negat tsaras bebeged semer o bebeged pishtim. So says the Gemara, has machlokas over here in the Rishonim as to what pasuk is being referred to over here when it says beged, because there's another pasuk that has the word beged, but that's what the basic part of the Gemara assumes over here. So beged eini ela beged semer by tsaras minayin lerabos. When it comes to tsaras, how do we know that we should include semer gemalim, the wool of a camel, utsemer anavim, the fur, wool literally of a rabbit or whatever, some kind of bunny, whatever the case may be. And look at this, vinotza shel izim, the feathers of an aze. An aze doesn't have feathers. It just means that it's very hard hair, certainly compared to a bunny, which was super soft hair. V'aklach v'asrikin v'ashiroin minayin, that even these types of silk would be chayiv, and this is going against what we said earlier, that would say you are chayiv on silk. So it says Gemara minayin that it would be chayiv in regards to the world of tzaras. Tamalomar o beged, and the word o is really lirabos. That brings us to the top of Mem Amid Aleph, and the Gemara says Tanu Rabbanon sadin b'tzitzis. If you have a linen garment, sadin is a linen garment. That's what Rashi says. Sadin is pishtan, and b'tzitzis, the tzitzis are made out of wool. So wool and linen. So says the Gemara, Beis Shammai potrin. Beis Shammai said that you're pater from shatnez in such cases. In other words, there's no isser of shatnez when it's wool strings and a linen garment. Beis Hillel mechayvin. Beis Hillel says that you're going to be chayiv in such a case. Halacha kedivrei Beis Hillel. Let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi says Beis Shammai potrin mina tzitzis. Oh, you're not pater from shatnez. There's no din of tzitzis. Beis Hillel says you are chayiv in tzitzis. V'alacha kedivrei Beis Hillel, that you are chayiv to do tzitzis in such a case with a linen garment, if you only have wool strings. Amar Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Tzadok, v'alo kol hamatil tcheles b'Yerushalayim einu ela mina masmin. We don't want people to do this. It's very confusing because it looks like there's no din of shatnez. How can Beis Hillel say that you're going to be obligated to do so if we have a brisa against him? That's Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Tzadok, who says that people were shocked when people would wear wool and linen. Amar Rebbe says, in Cain, that we hold like Beis Hillel, doubling down on the question, Lama Asruah, if we hold like Beis Hillel, who cares? It's mutter. Why would the Vasikim of Yerushalayim not want to wear shatnez tzitzis? It should be totally mutter. We hold like Beis Hillel. What are you shy of? You're shy about halacha? Says the Gemara, Lefi she'ein bekiin. Yeah, people aren't experts. So they're going to look at you and they're going to be like, you shagets, you're wearing shatnez. So there's actually a big discussion in Bris Milah about the different types of shields that we have. There's a shield that stops about 98% of the bleeding. It never stops all the bleeding. It's called the Magain clamp. So when I was trained on that clamp. I used it here in Chicago. A bunch of people were malshin on me. They called her by first. Somebody called her by Robinson and said, Karesh is using the Magain clamp. I was trained on it. So at the time, I called Rav Gedai Dov Schwartz. I called Rabbi Shmuel First Shlita, and I said, Rebbe, tell me it's usher to use. He said, I can't tell you that it's usher to use, but I can tell you that if you use it, people are going to talk about you. That's exactly what they said. So once I did a bris in Kins. This must go back close to 10 years ago. There's a guy in the community. He was a big bucky in halacha, and he wanted to watch a bris. He said, do you mind if I watch? I said, b'simcha rabba. So he watched me do a bris. He says, where's the blood? I said, right here. I looked at a gauze pad, whatever. I showed him. So he's like, oh, okay, I didn't know. I'm like, well, you're not a moa. You wouldn't you're not in the sugya. This is the same thing. People see and they say, you're wearing shatnez. How dare you? How could you? So that was the concern of Lefisha Ein Bikin. We'll reject this by the bottom of the page, but that right now is our starting point of the people in Yerushalayim who say that you should not do this. Amar le Rava bar of Chana, the Rava. I don't understand. Go put up pashkavil and go tell the whole Welt that it's mutter to wear tzitzis that are shatnez. What are you being so bashful about? Just go tell everybody, and then people will stop complaining. It's just a lack of information. Go tell them. Says the Gemara, no. Kol shekain demismahu ilon. You're going to get a lot of complaining. Oh, who put up the pashkavilin? Who is the rabbi? No, they forged this signature. No one's going to believe it. They're not going to believe that shatnez is mutter. Go have the big Talmud Chacham stand at the pulpit and give a whole ganz shiur on the fact that there's no shatnez because of the psukim, and you're allowed to wear shatnez by tzitzis. Says the Gemara, actually what we're concerned about is something else. Gzeira mishum klei ilan. If you are familiar with the sugyas of tchelas, this term kala ilan or klei ilan should be a well-known one. This is a dye that leaves us with a color of indigo. It's quite similar to the color of tchelas, except that it's not kosher. So says the Gemara, really what we were concerned about, it wasn't so much about that, we were just concerned about the different colors. Okay, when we talk about shatnez, why you're adding in another factor of blue? It doesn't matter. Tchelas can be white. Not tchelas can be white. The strings can be all white and be totally kosher and still be shatnez and still be mutter. It says the Gemara, kevan de efshar b'minon lo. Since it's possible that it could be done in its own color, in its own way, that's exactly what it should be. So we're not really so concerned about the kleila. So it says the Gemara, Reish Lakish says the same idea. This is a fascinating piece of Gemara, and it kind of undercuts the idea of shatnez a little bit in this particular context. Kevan de efshar b'minon, since it's possible to, skipped a line. Reish Lakish, to Amar Reish Lakish, kol makom shatamotze aseh v'lo saseh. Whenever you have a scenario in life, he wasn't talking about tzitzis in particular, where you have a mitzvah saseh and you have a mitzvah lo saseh in the same breath, mutav. If you're able to fulfill both the aseh and avoid the lo saseh, givaldik. V'im lav, yavo aseh v'yidche es halo saseh. If you're not able, then the aseh comes to override the lo saseh. So, if you have linen strings, you can be makayim the mitzvah saseh with a linen garment, and you can avoid the lo saseh by just not putting on wool strings. So you should be able to do that. As it says the Gemara, yeah, the imlav, he says, then you would not be able, then you would be able to have the assay violate the law. You don't need to. So says the Gemara, the live decay. Let's just make sure. What are you so worried about Klei Ilan? Let's just make sure they're selling the right thing. So says the Gemara, elagzera mishum te'ima. The concern that we have with tcheles is not about Klei Ilan. It's in fact about the testing string. The te'ima is the testing string. That's what Rashi says, Nisayon. Rashi is about 15 lines from the bottom. Dibra Maschel Te'ima, 2/3 of the way through the fat lines of Rashi. Te'ima is Nisayon. You took one wool string just to test, but that was not made lishma. And from here we see that tcheles has to be made lishma. That string is not kosher. Says the Gemara, V'lichteva adiski. Just write letters to explain what the halacha is. Says the Gemara, adiski leikum v'lismach. That's what you're going to rely upon. That is insufficient to rely upon to communicate this. So we'll stop right here at Amar Rabba. We are mid sugya. Nimir Tashem on Shabbos. We'll pick up with the rest of this. We're right now at the bottom line of Mem Amar Aleph. Wishing you all a beautiful night.